Did you know that Idaho is hiding the deepest river gorge in North America? Nearly 2,000 feet deeper than the Grand Canyon, and most Americans couldn't even tell you it exists. Or that the ground under southern Idaho was literally on fire just 2,000 years ago, with fresh lava pouring across a landscape that looks like the surface of another planet to this day. How about the fact that Idaho has the only state capitol building in the entire country heated by the Earth itself, pumping 165-degree water from 3,000 feet underground through pipes that have been running since the 1890s? Well, there's a lot more to the gem state than potatoes and ski resorts. This rugged, volcanic, geologically unhinged stretch of land is hiding some of the most extreme geography anywhere on the continent, and we've got 50 facts to prove it. Let's get into it. Fact 50. Idaho is 3 completely different states pretending to be one. People think of Idaho as a single place. It isn't. The narrow forested panhandle in the north is essentially the Pacific Northwest. Wet, heavily timbered, carved by glaciers, shaped by Ice Age floods. Drop south into the Central Highlands, and you're in one of the most rugged, roadless wilderness zones left in the lower 48. Keep going south, and you'll hit the Snake River Plain, a flat volcanic corridor that looks nothing like what's to its north. 3 completely distinct worlds sharing a border. The landscape doesn't transition gradually. In Idaho, it just stops and starts over. Fact 49. Idaho has the deepest river gorge in North America, and it's not the Grand Canyon. Everyone knows the Grand Canyon. Almost nobody talks about Hell's Canyon. Carved by the Snake River along the Idaho-Oregon border, Hell's Canyon drops nearly 8,000 feet from the peaks of the Seven Devils Mountains to the rivers below. That's almost 2,000 feet deeper than the Grand Canyon. For 40 of its 125 miles, the canyon exceeds a full mile in depth. There are no roads crossing it. Most of it is accessible only by foot or by river. It's the deepest river gorge on the North American continent, and the majority of Americans who've heard the name assume it's in Arizona. Fact 48. Hell's Canyon formed faster than geologists expected, and the science just changed. For decades, geologists assumed Hell's Canyon was millions of years old. Research published in 2025 flipped that assumption. Cave deposits inside the canyon show that a dramatic drainage capture event around 2 million years ago suddenly redirected the Snake River into its current path, and the river then cut the entire canyon in geological fast forward. Incision rates jumped tenfold almost overnight. In geologic terms, the deepest gorge in North America isn't an ancient feature ground out over hundreds of millions of years. It's a geologically young gash cut fast and deep by a river that essentially rerouted itself and then couldn't stop. Fact 47. The Snake River built itself by following a trail of ancient supervolcanoes. The Snake River Plain, that broad, flat arc cutting across southern Idaho, isn't a river valley in the traditional sense. It's the scar left by the Yellowstone hotspot as the North American plate slowly drifted over it for the past 17 million years. As the continent moved, the hotspot burned through the crust in sequence, triggering a chain of supervolcanic eruptions moving northeast across Idaho. Each eruption collapsed into a massive caldera. Those cauldras subsided, filled with lava and sediment, and the land flattened. The Snake River followed the lowest ground. So, when you drive across Snake River Plain, you're driving over the buried, flattened remains of a dozen ancient supervolcanoes, one after another, all the way to Yellowstone. Fact 46. Craters of the Moon is the largest young lava field in the contiguous United States. In the middle of the Snake River Plain, a 620 square mile ocean of jet black lava sits baking under the Idaho sun. Craters of the Moon erupted in 8 separate episodes between 15,000 and 2,000 years ago, meaning the most recent lava at this site is younger than the Roman Colosseum. Cinder cones up to 800 feet tall, more than 60 separate lava flows, lava tubes you can descend into and walk through. When early travelers reached this place, one described it as the strangest 75 square miles on the North American continent. Geologists consider it the most spectacular display of basaltic volcanism in the continental United States, and it is almost certainly not done. Fact 45. Craters of the Moon is expected to erupt again and geologists know roughly how much lava it will produce. Here's the thing about craters of the moon. It doesn't just have a history of eruptions, it has a pattern. Each of the 8 eruption episodes produce roughly the same volume of lava, making it what volcanologists call volume predictable. That means scientists can calculate not just that it will erupt again, but approximately how much material to expect, somewhere between 1 and 1.5 cubic miles of lava. The overdue interval between eruptions averages about 2,000 years. The last eruption ended 2,000 years ago. This isn't ancient volcanic history. This is a live system on a known cycle, and the next episode is simply a matter of when. Fact 44. Southern Idaho was flooded by one of the largest deluges in geological history. About 17,400 years ago, a massive prehistoric lake called Lake Bonneville, the ancestor of today's Great Salt Lake, overfilled its basin in Utah and breached a natural dam at Red Rock Pass in southeastern Idaho. What followed was the second largest flood ever recorded in geological history. Roughly 4,750 cubic kilometers of water tore northward through the Snake River plain at a peak discharge 500 times greater than the Snake River's maximum recorded flow. House-sized boulders were tossed like gravel. The flood scoured the canyon walls, stripped the surface down to bedrock, and created Shoshone Falls, almost incidentally, as it rearranged the landscape. The single event lasted weeks and permanently rewrote the geography of southern Idaho. Fact 43. Idaho has a waterfall taller than Niagara Falls, and nobody calls it by its name. Shoshone Falls on the Snake River drops 212 feet over a horseshoe-shaped basalt rim, nearly 1,000 feet wide. Niagara Falls drops 167 feet. Shoshone is 45 feet taller, wider at peak flow, and set inside a volcanic canyon that Niagara couldn't begin to compete with aesthetically. 19th century travelers called it the Niagara of the West, and the name stuck, which is probably why it never got famous on its own terms. Shoshone Falls was carved by the Bonneville Flood. At peak spring flow, 20,000 cubic feet of water per second spills over that rim. During irrigation season, Idaho Power diverts so much water upstream that the falls sometimes run nearly dry. A natural wonder that was literally born from a catastrophe, throttled by agriculture, and somehow still magnificent when the snowmelt hits. Fact 42. The Missoula Floods swept through Idaho's panhandle dozens of times. When the Bonneville Flood was a single catastrophic event in the south, northern Idaho was repeatedly hammered by something even more violent. During the last ice age, a lobe of Cordilleran ice sheet repeatedly dammed the Clark Fork River in Montana, backing up Glacial Lake Missoula, a lake holding as much water as Lakes Erie and Ontario combined. Every few decades, the ice dam failed. The water exploded westward through the Idaho Panhandle in a wall of hundreds of feet deep, thundering through the valleys at speeds approaching 65 miles an hour. Then the glacier advanced again. The lake refilled, and it happened again. Geologists have identified at least 40 separate flood events over roughly 2,000 years. The Panhandle was a flood corridor over and over until the ice finally retreated for good. Fact 41. Idaho has a lake so deep, the Navy uses it to test submarine technology. In the northern Panhandle, Lake Oreille sits in the glacially carved basin 43 miles long and over 1,150 feet deep, the 5th deepest lake in the United States. The bedrock beneath it was scoured by glaciers to 600 feet below sea level, then partially refilled with nearly 1,500 feet of sediment. The lake's depth and cold thermal layers make it acoustically ideal for mimicking deep ocean conditions. The U.S. Navy has operated a facility at Bayview on its southern shore since World War II, using the lake to test submarine sonar and acoustic systems. This landlocked body of water in the Idaho mountains, 375 miles from the nearest ocean, is a stand-in for the deep sea because nothing about the physics of sound cares where you are. Fact 40. The lake's basin was carved to below sea level, and you're looking at it from 2,000 feet up. Lake Oreille sits at an elevation of 2,062 feet above sea level. Its bedrock floor sits 600 feet below sea level, which means the glaciers that carved it cut so deep in the earth that the bottom of the basin drops below the level of the ocean, even though you're standing a third of a mile above the Pacific. Nearly 1,500 feet of glacial sediment and flood debris fills the gap between bedrock and waterline. What you see as a sparkling mountain lake is actually the surface layer of a geological wound that goes almost inconceivably deep. Fact 39. Idaho has the largest contiguous wilderness area in the lower 48 states. In central Idaho, the Frank Church River of No Return Wilderness covers 2.37 million acres, the largest single block of federally managed contiguous wilderness in the lower 48. Combined with the adjacent Selway Bitterroot Wilderness and surrounding roadless Forest Service lands, the complex grows to 3.3 million acres with no roads crossing. No highways, no power lines, rivers that can only be reached by small plane on a handful of primitive airstrips, or by days of hiking. The Salmon River, historically called the River of No Return because its current was too powerful for boats to travel upstream, still runs through it, wild and classified. It is the closest thing to true backcountry remaining in the continental United States. Fact 38. Idaho's highest mountain got taller in a single morning. Bora Peak is Idaho's highest point at 12,662 feet. On the morning of October 28, 1983, a magnitude 6.9 earthquake struck the Lost River Range nearby at the time, the largest earthquake in recorded history of the continental interior. The fault ruptured along a 21-mile scarp. Some sections dropped 9 feet in a single jolt. The valley floor subsided by as much as 5 feet, and Bora Peak itself was lifted approximately 8 inches to a foot in the same event. The mountain is actively being built by seismic forces. The scar from that fault rupture is still perfectly visible on the hillside, a fresh-looking line in the landscape left by a mountain growing in real time. Fact 37. Idaho's mountains are still being built by active faults. The Lost River Range, the Lemhi Range, the Beaverhead Mountains, the entire spine of central Idaho are all fault block ranges, meaning they're being lifted along normal faults as the basin and range province extends. These aren't old, finished mountains wearing down. They're young, actively rising, fault-controlled blocks. The same seismic belt that produced the 1983 earthquake runs through the region, and geologists consider every segment of these range-front faults capable of rupturing. Bora Peak's 8-inch jump is not a historical curiosity, it's a preview. Fact 36. The city of Boise has been heated by the Earth since 1892. Boise sits over a geothermal aquifer that delivers water at 177 degrees Fahrenheit from about 3,000 feet underground. In 1892, before Idaho was 2 years old as a state, residents started tapping it to heat homes along Warm Springs Avenue. That system is still operating today. Boise now runs the largest municipally operated geothermal heating district in the United States, warming nearly 500 buildings across the city, including City Hall, university facilities, and hospital campuses. The Idaho State Capitol is heated by this system, making it the only state capitol in the country powered by the Earth's own heat. The volcano that originally created this resource is Yellowstone. Boise is essentially living off the residual warmth of a supervolcano. Fact 35. Idaho's panhandle and its main body are almost completely different climates. The Idaho panhandle is narrow, just 45 miles wide at its thinnest, and geographically pinched between Montana and Washington. It receives 30 to 50 inches of rain and snowfall annually, supports dense, coniferous forest, and shares more ecological DNA with the Pacific Northwest than with anything in southern Idaho. The Snake River Plain, 300 miles to the south, gets 8 to 12 inches of precipitation each year, runs into the high desert, and sees summer temperatures 30 degrees hotter. They're in the same state. They might as well be on different planets. Idaho's shape on the map, that narrow panhandle attached to a wide body, is the shape of two completely different geographies forced into a single political boundary. Fact 34. A supervolcano left its track across the entire width of southern Idaho. The Yellowstone hotspot has been burning a scar across the continent for 17 million years. That scar runs the full length of southern Idaho as the Snake River Plain. As the North American plate drifted southwestward, at roughly an inch per year, the hotspot burned through it in sequence, producing a chain of calderas, supervolcanic craters 10 to 40 miles wide, that get progressively older the further southwest you go. The newest expression of that hotspot is Yellowstone. The rest of them are buried under lava and sediment somewhere beneath the Idaho Plain. Idaho is the exhaust trail of the most powerful recurring volcanic system on the continent. Fact 33. Idaho has a waterfall hidden inside the largest wilderness in the lower 48. deep in the Frank Church Wilderness, accessible only by a days-long float down the middle fork of the Salmon or a backcountry hike. Vail Falls drops into a narrow canyon slot so remote that most people will never see it in their lifetimes. But wilderness waterfalls are everywhere in central Idaho. The Salmon River drainages have carved so deep into the batholith that sheer granite walls and cascades are simply part of the terrain. The wilderness itself was named partly for Senator Frank Church, who wrote the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act specifically to protect the middle fork of the Salmon. He'd floated it. He knew what it was worth. The law followed the river, not the other way around. Fact 32. Idaho's central mountains are the core of an ancient supercontinent edge. The Idaho batholith, the granite heart of central Idaho, is the cooled remnant of a massive magma body that formed when ancient oceanic plates dove beneath the edge of North America roughly 100 million years ago. The heat generated by that collision melted rock deep in the crust, and the resulting magma slowly cooled underground into the granite that now defines the Sawtooth Range, the White Clouds, the Salmon River Mountains. These peaks aren't volcanic, they're plutonic, cooked from below, then uplifted and exposed by millions of years of erosion. The jagged granite skyline of central Idaho is the exhumed interior of a mountain building event that finished 100 million years ago. Fact 31. Idaho was once on the edge of the Pacific Ocean. About 900 million years ago, before the tectonic plates had shuffled into their current configurations, Idaho sat at the margin of a supercontinent. The Pacific Ocean lapped at what is now central Idaho. As plates shifted over the following hundreds of millions of years, volcanic island arcs and ocean floor sediments were scraped off subducting plates and plastered onto the continental margin, a process called accretion. Large chunks of Idaho are made of ancient ocean floor and island arc material that was essentially docked onto the continent. Parts of Idaho are generally from somewhere else, geologically speaking. Remnants of terrain that originated in the ancient Pacific are baked into the Idaho bedrock. Fact 30. 6 ecosystems converge in one Idaho river canyon. The Niobrara River in Nebraska does something similar, but the Salmon River Canyon in central Idaho does it on a grander scale and in a more extreme setting. Ponderosa pine, Douglas fir, western red cedar, Rocky Mountain shrub steppe, riparian cottonwood forest, and open grassland all coexist within the canyon walls at different elevations and exposures. The canyon drops 4,000 feet from the rim to river in some places, creating a compressed stack of climate zones. Drive from the canyon bottom to the rim and you pass through the equivalent of driving from the American Southwest to the Canadian Rockies. The canyon isn't just a landscape, it's a complete ecological library, vertical. Fact 29. Idaho has lava tubes you can walk into that still have ice on the floor. In the lava fields of southern Idaho, the terrain is riddled with lava tubes. Tunnels formed from the outer surface of a flowing lava river cooled and hardened while molten rock continued flowing through the interior. When the flow stopped, it left a hollow tube behind. Some of these tubes are large enough to walk through. And in certain tubes, at craters of the moon, where the insulating lava rock keeps the interior cold year-round, ice persists on the cave floor through the entire summer. There are places in southern Idaho where you can stand in a tube formed by a lava flow 2,000 years old and touch ice that has never melted. Fire made the cave. Cold keeps it. Fact 28. Idaho's geology makes it the gem capital of America. Literally, Idaho is called the gem state, and it's not a marketing slogan. The collision of tectonic plates, volcanic activity, hydrothermal systems, and ancient ocean sediments has produced one of the most mineralogically diverse states in the country. Idaho produces star garnets, found almost everywhere else on Earth outside of India. The Hells Canyon region yields thunder eggs. The Oreille Mountains contains opals. Idaho has produced gold, silver, lead, zinc, cobalt, and copper in commercial quantities. The Frank Church Wilderness alone sits over mineral deposits that have been fully mapped. The geology that makes Idaho virtually dramatic is the same geology that makes it a gem factory. Fact 27. Idaho's star garnet is found in only 2 places on Earth. The state gem of Idaho is the star garnet, a deep reddish-purple crystal that shows a 4 or 6-rayed star on its surface when cut and polished. This phenomenon, called asterism, is caused by aligned needle-like inclusions inside the stone that reflect light in a cross pattern. Star garnets occur in only 2 places in the world, Idaho and the Himalayan region of India. Both locations share similar ancient metamorphic geology, the same type of rock, formed under the same type of conditions, on opposite sides of the planet. Idaho and the Himalayas are geologically related. That star on the stone is the proof. Fact 26. A volcano erupted through a river in Idaho and created something unique in the world. Near Menin in eastern Idaho, two massive Menin cones, called the Menin Butts, rise from the Snake River Plain. They're enormous. The North Menin Butte is one of the largest tuff cones in the world. But what makes them unique is how they formed. The erupting magma came up directly through the Snake River. When it hit the water, the lava instantly shattered into microscopic glassy particles, exploded into steam, and the eruption built itself up from within the river itself. They are the only tuff cones on Earth formed by a freshwater eruption. The Snake River literally had a volcano erupt through it, and it left two mountains standing in the middle of the plain where the river used to flow. Fact 25. Idaho's batholith is so massive that it redirected the Continental Divide. When the Idaho batholith rose as a dome of cooling granite beneath the Cretaceous crust, it created a topographic hide that physically shifted the Continental Divide eastward. Before the batholith's intrusion, streams in the area drained differently. The sheer mass of cooling rock beneath Idaho warped the surface drainage patterns across the whole region. The Continental Divide, as it runs through Idaho today, separating rivers that drain to the Pacific from those that drain to the Gulf, is partly where it is because of a blob of granite that solidified underground 100 million years ago. The batholith didn't just make mountains, it reorganized the plumbing of the continent. Fact 24. Idaho's Salmon River is one of the longest undammed rivers in the lower 48. The Salmon River runs 425 miles from its headwaters in the Sawtooth Valley to its confluence with the Snake River, and it does so almost entirely free-flowing. No dams on its main stem. For a river that size in a state as agriculture as the American West, that's generally extraordinary. It's one of the longest undammed river systems remaining in the lower 48. The canyon it carved is so deep and rugged that engineers who surveyed it for dam sites in the middle 20th century concluded that construction simply wasn't feasible. The terrain that made Idaho's central mountains impassable for settlers ended up saving the river by accident. Fact 23. Idaho has a river you can canoe past more than 200 waterfalls. The Salmon isn't Idaho's only spectacular river. Up in the Panhandle, the St. Joe River, often called the Shadowy St. Joe for its deep forest canopy, flows through canyon country and old-growth cedar, in a setting that barely resembles the rest of Idaho. But the most waterfall-dense corridor in the state is the South Fork of the Paiute and the various tributaries feeding the Boise River system through the Sawtooth, where spring runoff turns dozens of side canyons into cascades. Then there's the main draw, the Middle Fork of the Salmon, a 100-mile whitewater run entirely within the Frank Church Wilderness, where waterfalls pour into the river from both sides, and the only way out is downstream. People wait years on a permit lottery for a chance to float it. Fact 22. Idaho's Panhandle was rerouted by one of the most important railroad deals in American history. The shape of Idaho, the bizarre narrow panhandle attached to a wide body, is not a geographical accident. It's a political one. When Idaho Territory was created in 1863, the Panhandle was included largely because the railroad lobby wanted a contiguous corridor of American territory stretching from the Pacific to the east. The Northern Pacific Railroad needed the land to stay American, not Canadian. The Panhandle was drawn in to keep that strip intact. What resulted was a state shape that makes no geographical sense. A narrow northern strip with Pacific Northwest ecology, stapled to a wide southern body with high desert and volcanic plains. Idaho's silhouette is a map of 19th century railroad politics drawn over two completely different geographies. Fact 21. Idaho is the only state where two massive flood systems converge from opposite directions. Southern Idaho was hit by the Bonneville Flood coming from the southeast. Northern Idaho was hit by the Missoula Floods coming from the northeast. Both systems ultimately funneled down the Snake and Columbia rivers to the Pacific. That means Idaho sat at the intersection of two of the largest flood events in North American geological history. One from the south, one from the north, that both ran through the state within a few thousand years of each other. The landscape of modern Idaho was shaped as much by catastrophic water as by any other force. Lava made the surface, floods rewrote it. Fact 20. The Idaho batholith produced mountains that are still eroding, and the sand ends up in California. The granite of the Idaho batholith erodes slowly, grain by grain, into Idaho's rivers. The Snake River carries that sediment west, delivers it to the Columbia River, and the Columbia carries it to the Pacific Ocean off the coast of Oregon. Sand from the Idaho's central mountains is grain by grain, accumulating on the ocean floor of the Pacific coast. The batholith that formed 100 million years ago is slowly dissolving into the sea. Idaho's mountains are, in geological time, temporary. What you see now is just a snapshot in a process that has been going on since the granite first surfaced. Fact 19. Idaho's Snake River has lost its salmon. The Snake River was once one of the great salmon rivers of the American West. Chinook salmon, sockeye, steelhead, they migrated more than 900 miles from the Pacific Ocean, through the Columbia, up the Snake, into the streams of central Idaho to spawn. Those fish fed native peoples for thousands of years and are written into the cultural identity of Idaho's tribes as something close to sacred. Today, 4 dams on the lower Snake River, constructed between 1961 and 1975, block that migration. Some salmon still attempt a passage through the fish ladders, but the runs are a fraction of their historical size. The rivers those fish evolved to reach over millions of years are still there. The fish have been legislatively prevented from reaching them. Fact 18. Idaho has the only tuff ring in the world formed by a river eruption, and it's also a national natural landmark. The North Menam Butte isn't just geologically unique, it's massive enough that the U.S. government designated it a national natural landmark, specifically because of its singular character. Standing at the rim and looking down into the crater, you're looking at the remnants of a volcanic event that should not have been possible in the middle of a Great Plains river. The inner walls of the crater show layer upon layer of fine-grained volcanic tuff, the compressed record of an explosion that happened in water. No other place on Earth has this feature formed in fresh water. Idaho has the only one. Fact 17. Idaho's mountains contain some of the most remote terrain in the continental United States. The center of the Frank Church Wilderness is further from a road than any other point in the continental United States. To reach certain parts of it, you either fly into one of a small number of primitive grass airstrips in small aircraft, or you hike for multiple days from the nearest trailhead. There are drainages in the Salmon River Mountains that have almost certainly been visited by fewer modern humans than parts of Antarctica. Cell service does not exist. Satellite phones are common. This wilderness, in the heart of a populated American state in 2026, is as close to genuinely unreachable terrain as the lower 48 contains. Fact 16. Ancient people in Idaho left a map of the Snake River carved in stone. In the basalt cliffs along the Snake River, prehistoric inhabitants carved a petroglyph map of the upper Snake River, a stylized but recognizable representation of the river's course, its tributaries, any key features along its banks. It is thought to be one of the oldest surviving geographic representations in North America. The people who made it had no satellite imagery, no surveying instruments. They had generations of intimate knowledge of the terrain and the spatial intelligence to represent it in stone. That map is still on the cliff. The river it depicts is still below it. The relationship between the two, rock and water, has outlasted everything that came between them. Fact 15. Idaho's geology killed the buffalo before hunters did. The Snake River's plains have fields and volcanic terrain acted as a natural barrier to bison migration. While tens of millions of bisons roamed the Great Plains east of Idaho, the volcanic terrain of southern Idaho and the rugged mountains of the center kept large herds from establishing permanent presence in much of the state. The landscape shaped what animals lived here and what didn't. The tribes of Idaho, the Nez Perce, the Shoshone, the Bannock, adapted hunting practices to the terrain they had, including seasonal crossings of the mountains to hunt bison on the eastern plains in Montana. Idaho's geology determined the food system of its first peoples as surely as any cultural decision they ever made. Fact 14. Idaho's mountains still contain Pleistocene glaciers. In the highest peaks of the Sawtooth and Pioneer ranges, small permanent ice fields and glaciers have persisted since the last ice age. These aren't the grand glaciers of Montana's Glacier National Park. They're remnant ice bodies, tucked into north-facing cirques and shadowed valleys, where snow accumulates faster than it melts. They've been retreating steadily for decades. Some are expected to disappear entirely within a generation. These small ice bodies are the direct descendants. These small ice bodies are the direct descendants of the massive ice sheets that covered much of northern Idaho 15,000 years ago, slowly starving in a warming climate. When they go, something that has existed continuously since the Pleistocene will be gone. Fact 13. Idaho has an active lava field that scientists monitor for signs of the next eruption. The USGS actively monitors craters of the moon is a live volcanic system. The same monitoring network that watches Yellowstone watches the Idaho volcanic fields. Seismometers track ground deformation. Gas sensors watch for shifts in volcanic emissions. The 2,000-year gap between eruption episodes puts the next event statistically in the window of possibility. Not certainty, but the monitoring system exists precisely because possibility in geological time is close enough to take seriously. Southern Idaho is a watched landscape. The lava that last flowed there 2,000 years ago is sitting on top of a system that hasn't finished making decisions. Fact 12. Idaho has a canyon that makes the Columbia River Gorge look modest. Hell's Canyon is 125 miles long, averages over 5,500 feet deep, and has almost no road access along its entire length. The Columbia River Gorge, one of the most famous river canyons in America West, maxes out at about 4,000 feet of relief. The Snake River at the bottom of Hell's Canyon is running over rocks formed by underwater volcanoes 150 million years ago. The walls above it shift through layers of basalt, granite, and ancient seafloor material as you gain elevation. It is one of the most geologically complex canyon walls in the country, a vertical cross-section through events spanning hundreds of millions of years, and it gets a fraction of the visitors of the Grand Canyon or the gorge, because it refuses to make itself easy to reach. Fact 11. Idaho's rivers once carried more salmon than most anywhere on Earth. Before dams, before irrigation, before European settlement, the Snake River system supported salmon runs estimated at 30 to 40 million fish annually. Chinook salmon swam past what is now Shoshone Falls, the falls that bar their passage today because those falls didn't exist before the Bonneville Flood carved them 17,000 years ago. For most of the time that salmon have existed as a species, the Snake River was fully open to them. What we call the current state of Idaho's salmon runs, blocked, diminished, managed by fish hatcheries, is the anomaly. The 10,000 years of abundant salmon are the norm. The 60 years since the dams went in are the exception. Fact 10. Idaho's Sawtooth Ridge Range is one of the sharpest mountain skylines in North America. The Sawtooth Mountains, near Stanley, Idaho, rise in a serrated wall of granite that looks like something from New Zealand or Patagonia, dropped into the American West. 40 peaks above 10,000 feet in a 40-mile stretch. Hundreds of alpine lakes gouged into the granite by glaciers. The Sawtooth Wilderness, immediately adjacent, protects 756,000 acres of this terrain. The reason these mountains look so dramatic, so jagged, so vertical, is that the granite is a hard, resistant rock that doesn't round off gradually. When the softer material around it erodes away, what's left are clean, sharp faces. The sawtooths are what happens when a batholith gets stripped to its bones. Fact 9. Idaho was on the Pacific coast of a supercontinent 900 million years ago. Modern Idaho sits in the middle of the continent, but 900 million years ago, it was at the western margin of a supercontinent called Rodinia, essentially the coastline. As Rodinia broke apart, ocean sediments accumulated along what is now Idaho's western margin. These ancient seafloor sediments were later metamorphosed, intruded by granite, and uplifted into the mountains you see today. The rocks visible in the Clearwater and Salmon River drainages contain some of the oldest material in Idaho. Precambrian rocks formed when life on Earth had not yet evolved past single-celled organisms. Idaho's bedrock is a geological archive, stretching back nearly 1 billion years. Fact 8. The Bonneville Flood moved boulders the size of houses and scattered them like gravel. The debris left by the Bonneville Flood is called the melon gravel. Rounded basalt boulders deposited in massive bars at wide points along Snake River Canyon. Some of these boulders are over 5 feet across. They were ripped from the upstream canyon walls by floodwaters moving at speeds and volumes no modern river approaches. They are deposited in bars that geologists describe as resembling the greatly magnifying bed of a braided stream. Walking through some of these boulder fields near the Twin Falls today, you're walking through the flood signature of an event that lasted a few weeks and produced more water movement than most rivers accomplish in a million years. Fact 7. Idaho has more navigable whitewater river miles than almost any state in the country. The combination of the Frank Church Wilderness rivers, the Snake River Canyon system, and the Panhandle's river drainages gives Idaho a density of whitewater river miles that makes it one of the premier running states in the nation. The Middle Fork of the Salmon alone is a 100-mile continuous wilderness float with over 300 named rapids, entirely within roadless wilderness. The main Salmon adds another 80-plus miles. The Snake through Hell's Canyon is runnable by permit. Idaho's rivers exist at the intersection of extreme topography and intact wild terrain. The rivers run hard because Idaho's mountains drop fast, and they stay wild because the canyon walls kept the roads out. Fact 6. The astronauts who walked on the moon trained in southern Idaho. Before Apollo 14, NASA geologists brought the mission crew to the lava fields at craters of the moon to train them in volcanic rock identification and sampling. The terrain, black basalt, cinder cones, lava tubes, ash fields, was the closest analog to the lunar surface available on Earth. The astronauts walked across Idaho's lava, learning to identify rock types they would later collect on the moon. The name Craters of the Moon isn't just poetic. It was scientifically apt enough that NASA used it as a classroom. Idaho sent astronauts to the moon. Sort of. Fact 5. Idaho's soil is some of the most volcanically fertile on Earth because a supervolcano broke down above it. The agricultural productivity of southern Idaho isn't just about irrigation. It's about soil chemistry. Millions of years of volcanic eruptions along the Snake River Plain deposited layer after layer of mineral-rich volcanic material across the region. As these deposits weathered, they produced soils rich in phosphorus, potassium, and trace minerals that most agricultural soils have to be artificially supplemented to match. Idaho grows a third of the United States' potatoes, not just because of the water, but because the volcanic legacy of the Yellowstone hotspot produced soil that potatoes essentially evolved to thrive in. The supervolcano made the farm. Fact 4. Idaho's rivers are carving through the continent in ways that will reshape the map. The Snake River and its tributaries are still actively cutting downward. Hell's Canyon is still deepening, a fraction of a millimeter per year. The Salmon River is still excavating its corridor through the batholith. The Boise River is still widening its floodplain. Glaciers in the Sawtooth are retreating, releasing meltwater that accelerates erosion downstream. The landscape of Idaho is not a finished product. The rivers are still doing what rivers do, moving rock from high ground to low ground, grain by grain, and flood by flood, working on a timeline that makes human civilization look like a long weekend. Fact 3. Idaho has the only stretch of river in the lower 48 that is legally required to stay wild. The Middle Fork of the Salmon was one of the original rivers protected under the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act of 1968, a law that Idaho's own Senator Frank Church helped write specifically with the river in mind. The designation doesn't just protect the Middle Fork from dams. It requires the federal government to actively maintain its wild character, water quality, free-flowing conditions, ecological integrity. In a country where most rivers in agricultural states have been dammed, diverted, or channelized beyond recognition, the Middle Fork has a legal guarantee of wilderness baked into the federal law. It is one of the few rivers in the country that has the right to exist as a river. Fact 2. Idaho's volcanic fields are still actively degassing, and scientists are watching. At craters of the moon and across the eastern Snake River Plain, volcanic gases, mostly carbon dioxide and sulfur compounds, continue to seep upward through cracks and fissures in the lava. In certain low-lying areas near active fissures, CO2, carbon dioxide concentrations, can reach dangerous levels in confined spaces. This isn't residual heat from an extinct system. It's the ongoing signature of a magmatic system that is geologically active, monitored, and considered capable of future eruption. The lava fields of southern Idaho are not decorative. They are the current surface expressions of processes that are still in motion, still connected to heat sources deep below, still working towards whatever comes next. Fact number 1. Idaho, the land that never stopped being made. So after all that, here's the biggest fact of all. Idaho is never finished. Bora Peak grows at a fraction of an inch every few decades when the fault slips again. The Snake River cuts a little deeper in the basalt every spring. The glaciers in the Sawtooths lose another edge to the warming summers. The craters of the moon lava sits on a cycle that geologists are monitoring in real time. The salmon that once ran the Snake River in their tens of millions are pressing against the dams year after year. The Yellowstone hotspot is still burning northeast under Yellowstone, and the Idaho it left behind. Buried caldras, flattened plains, fertile volcanic soil, lava fields 2,000 years old, is the exhaust trail of a fire that started 17 million years ago and has not gone out. Idaho may look like mountains, forest, and empty highway, but it is a landscape assembled from supervolcanoes, ice age floods, colliding continents, and rivers that have been cutting the same stone for millions of years, redrawing itself one earthquake, one eruption, and one flood at a time. And that's probably the wildest fact of all.